classification and in general just how we kind of break things up, and especially in life sciences, so like biology, how we categorize things to help scientists be able to understand them better and to help us study things better. So we're going to start out by defining a few of these terms, and then we'll have an activity at the end of this that I think is kind of funny. And just keep in mind, if I find it entertaining, then something I like to do in the class, then at least I'm happy, right? Okay, so first things first, classification. When we talk about classification, we're talking about the process of grouping things together based on similarities. Okay, so classification is grouping And why do we do this? We do this to make them easier to study. The word taxonomy itself is actually referring to the study of how things are organized. So the scientific study of how things are organized. The next thing that you guys see on your notes page on that left-hand side, binomial nomenclature, if you break this word down, it helps. Okay, so bi is referring to two, and nomial is referring to names. So binomial nomenclature is a two-part naming system. For example, does anyone know the scientific word or term for humans? Austin?
Homo sapiens.
Good, Homo sapiens. So Homo, this is just an example, Homo sapiens. Two parts, right? Now, when we write a name scientifically, first things, the first word is always capitalized and the second word is lowercase. The scientific name for things. The other thing is if you're typing it, it's italicized. But if you're handwriting it, it's hard to do that. Italicized is like where the font's kind of bent. So bold, italics, underline. You would put it in italics. But if there's not an option to put something in italics, then you just make sure that you have that first word capitalized, the second word lowercase. What these two words are made of is the genus and the species that they belong to. So the genus would be, in this case, Homo is the genus. And then the species, in this case, sapiens. So the genus and species both is just a classification of similar, closely related organisms. So classification of similar, closely related organisms. And the species is going to be the same, but there's one little addition to it. So species are similar, closely related organisms, but the difference is they have, they are all able to mate with each other, produce offspring that then can produce offspring. So if things mate together and can't produce offspring, they're not the same species. We see this a lot in horse breeding when they have mules, donkeys, horses. If you breed a donkey and a horse together, you'll get a what, Libby? Do you know? A mule. Can a mule breed? Nope, they can't. They're sterile. They don't have any sperm or eggs. They have no way to breed at that point. And the reason why is because a horse and a donkey are not the same species. So what happens when you cross them is you could still possibly have an offspring, and very few species can you cross and have an offspring. Has anyone seen like Napoleon Dynamite? And they talk about what the liger in there. They actually have ligers. It's a such thing, but ligers themselves cannot breed beyond that. Okay, so it can happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but to actually be closely related enough to be the same species means that they produce offspring and that their offspring can produce offspring. So you don't end up with like a terminal line or end to that generation. Okay, so under species, what you really want to add in there is related. Actually, I'm not going to use the word related because that's a really bad word when we talk about, hold on a second here. We're not going to use, I guess what I was saying is we're not going to use the word related. We're going to use the word, I know. I was trying to erase it. It wouldn't erase. We're going to use the word similar enough to mate and produce offspring. And I'm running out of room, but you also need to add to that, not only are they similar enough to mate and produce offspring, but their offspring can produce offspring. So, as in their offspring are still fertile or able to have a quote-unquote baby. Taxonomic keys. So, taxonomic keys. And what we mean by taxonomic keys is tools which are used to determine and identify organisms. What's an organism? Okay, left hand or right hand side of your notes, levels of classification. Poster over there says the 3 domains of life. What that's talking about is the broadest category that we can put living things into. So it doesn't get any broader than bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Okay. So up here at the top, if you can't read that on your handout, it does say domain. And what we do is we get more specific as we move down this chart. So it goes from domain to kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And let's keep in mind that when we talk about binomial nomenclature, which 2 levels are we talking about? Binomial nomenclature uses which 2 levels, Jackie? Yeah, the genus and species. That's why when you look on the left-hand side of your notes and it says binomial nomenclature, it says genus and species under it. Because it's using those bottom 2 levels, the most specific levels, right? So we don't name humans based on the domain. That'd be eukarya. The other things in the kingdom, in the domain eukarya, look at the picture up here. Owls, lions, dolphins, lizards. Are we pretty closely related to lizards?
Yes.
Obviously not. So the point I'm making is that there's a lot in those domains, but as you get down and get more specific to things that are more similar to you, that's when you get down into identifying specific species and specific individuals. You guys are going to get a handout about norns. And norns sorry to break it to you, are not real. However, I think that they're kind of fun to practice this taxonomic key on because it kind of simplifies things and makes it more of a fun activity as opposed to like, I'm not sure what this word is. It's kind of a joke in a sense because some of these words are silly and goofy. At the same time, when we start talking about some of these scientific names of things, you guys are going to be like, well, what? How do you pronounce that? You know, they're going to look big and maybe intimidating. But the point I'm making with today's activity is it's really not as hard as some of us make it, okay? So we're going to do this in class, and we're going to do 2 examples together as a group, and then I'm going to turn you loose at your tables, and you'll be able to try and identify the rest of the norms on the actual paper that you get. So let's get those handed out first. Shows you how to identify something so that you can go through sometimes hundreds of different species. Lots of times we see these like in weed field guides, like farmers will use them to identify the weeds out in their field. But you're going to follow the steps in the key in order to identify things. So in this example, the key starts up here. Notice how it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Along that left-hand side of the key. So Lindy, I know you're coloring your jeans right now, but if you look at the key, you would see that. 1 through 7. The first step, you always start on 1, and you look at the features on step 1, and you determine which criteria your norm fits. So has pointed ears or has rounded ears? Are they pointing on the end?
Yes.
Yes. So it says, has pointed ears, go to 3. So you skip across which one?
2.
Skip 2 and go to 3. Where it says ears pointed upward or downward?
Upward.
Upward. So then you're going to go to
5.
5 is upward. Engages in waving behavior or does not engage in waving behavior? Is he waving?
No.
Nope. So go to
6.
6. Has hair on head, has no hair on head.
Has hair on head.
So his name is Beverless. So write the name in. And then it is pretty easy. The one thing that I find with students is sometimes when you're reading across the line, and I think it's what Ethan even did maybe, sometimes people read across and then they jump down on a step on accident, so they get off. And that's tough, because then you almost need to go back and double check, right, that you were able to identify it correctly. So let's do, I'm going to let you guys pick the example. So out of everything that's left, I'm going to let the quietest person pick, which I believe when I looked up was Chase. So Chase, which one, bud? C. We're doing it again.
No, I don't get how to do it.
Okay, Ty, you listening? Here we go. So you're going to lead me through this. So you are looking at step 1, and what 2 options do you have on step 1 to decide the name of C?
Wait.
Read it out loud. What are your 2 options?
Has pointed ears and has rounded.
Okay, so does he have pointed ears or rounded ears?
He has pointed.
Okay, so has pointed ears, followed across. What step do you go to?
2.
Has pointed ears, follow it straight across. What step do you go to?
Go to
Go.
2.
Has pointed ears.
3.
Thank you. Usually if I go back to the same question I just gave you, it means you weren't correct, right? Okay, so we're going down to step 3. Your 2 options are what, Ty?
Has pointed ears pointed upward, ears pointed down.
Okay, so are they pointing up or down?
Up.
So we're going to go to
5.
5, okay? Engages in waving behavior, does not engage in waving behavior. Is it waving?
Nope.
So what step do we go to?
Go to 6.
6. Has hair on head, does not have hair on head, but may have ear tufts.
They have his tufts.
Okay,
7.
so then go to 7. Okay, good. Has a tail, has no tail. It looks aggressive.
Okay.
Aggressive. So this one's name is? Ragus.